The sky tore open as Thor, the god of thunder, was flung from Asgard into a galaxy consumed by endless war, the void itself bending and quivering as he fell through it, arriving on a planet scarred by millennia of conflict. The acrid stench of promethium, burning flesh, and ozone filled the air, mingling with smoke and ash that rose in endless columns from shattered cities. The ground trembled beneath the titanic weight of Imperial Titans striding across the horizon, their weapons vomiting fire and annihilation. Space Marines in ceramite armor moved with precise coordination, bolters raised, their visors reflecting the storm of lightning crackling across Mjolnir as Thor rose to his feet, eyes blazing with divine purpose. The energy from his hammer tore through orc mobs, chaos cultists, tyrannid swarms, and heretical war engines alike, scattering armies as if they were leaves caught in a gale. Imperial guardsmen stared in awe as the warp whispered temptations of dominion, vengeance, and unbridled power into his mind. Yet he pressed forward without hesitation, toppling demons, dismantling engines of war, rescuing the desperate, inspiring soldiers across hive cities, shattered moons, and blasted wastelands. Conflicts raged for decades and centuries, facing chaos champions, tyrannid biobeasts, orc warlords, and rogue titans. Never faltering, Thor's hammer struck hope into allies and terror into enemies, reshaping entire campaigns and altering the fates of countless worlds with every swing. His movement across battlefields so vast that the stars themselves seemed to tremble left trails of awe, legend, and divine justice. As centuries stretched into millennia, Thor's movements became a symphony of destruction and salvation. His hammer delivered death to the wicked, guidance to the lost, and fury to those who dared defy the Imperium. Every strike a story, every blow a judgment, every step a declaration that the son of Odin had arrived and the galaxy would never forget. Planets burned and empires fell as Thor's storm carved paths of light through darkness. Mortals were inspired, enemies terrified, and history rewritten. He crushed war engines, scattered demonic horrors, inspired courage and hope, striking terror into the hearts of those who would destroy humanity. His presence reshaped not only the battlefield, but the minds of all who bore witness. Even as centuries of war continued unabated, Thor endured. His hammer remained unbroken, his purpose unwavering. The tale of the god of thunder in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium was only beginning. Each moment, a prelude to the legend that would echo through eternity, reshaping the fates of men, gods, and the universe itself. Lightning danced across the heavens, fire consumed battlefields, and the roar of Mjolnir echoed across the stars. Unstoppable, unending, eternal, and magnificent, a storm incarnate in a galaxy where there is only war. Yet even in this grim darkness, hope persisted wherever Thor's hammer struck. From the ashes of destroyed worlds, heroes rose inspired by the god among them, the echo of thunder following him across planets and fleets, his legend intertwining with the history of the Imperium, the chaos forces, and the endless conflicts that defined this brutal universe. Thor pressed onward, never pausing, never yielding, the universe itself seeming to bend to the force of his will. The story of Thor and Warhammer 40K unfolded in one continuous, unstoppable, unbroken epic of lightning, fire, blood, and divine power, carrying through the eons, terrifying enemies, guiding allies, and shaping destiny across a galaxy consumed by unending war. Even the stars themselves seemed to resonate with the divine presence of Odin's son. His hammer would never falter. His thunder would never cease. His story would be remembered for eternity as he walked through the grim darkness, unstoppable, eternal, magnificent, and divine. Each strike echoed across worlds. Each step rewrote history as empires rose and fell. And the God of Thunder remained eternal, shaping destiny with every swing, every step, every heartbeat, a living storm of fire and lightning that would echo through time without end. The storms of war never ceased. Across countless worlds, the Imperium burned and bled, its legions locked in endless struggle, and amidst that darkness, Thor moved as living thunder. His arrival on new battlefields was heralded by lightning splitting the void, his hammer streaking down from orbit like a comet of pure divine wrath. Entire battalions of chaos cultists vanished in white light, their screams drowned beneath the roar of celestial thunder. Even the Adeptus Astartes, warriors engineered to fear nothing, knelt in reverence when they beheld him. For in his eyes burned the fury of something older and mightier than the Emperor's angels. In the shadow of hive spires broken by centuries of siege, Thor's hammer crushed war machines forged in blasphemy. Sparks from Mjolnir's impact danced like dying stars, each one consuming heretics in cleansing flame. The skies filled with winged demons shrieking in terror, their bodies unraveling in the brilliance of his storms. When the warp howled, Thor's voice answered louder, drowning madness in the purity of thunder. The planet's crust cracked beneath the storm's fury. Oceans boiled away, and from the ashes, humanity rose once more to fight, emboldened by the echo of his power. In the far reaches of the Segmentum Obscurus, he encountered a war so ancient and vast that even gods might have turned away. The Tyrannid swarm had descended like a living shadow, consuming suns and worlds without mercy. Yet as the hive fleets advanced, the storm came. Thor struck from the void, his lightning lashing across kilometers of chitin and flesh, burning through the great bioships like fire through parchment. The swarm reacted, turning its countless eyes upon the lone god, but he stood undaunted. His roar filled the void, and Mjolnir's strike shattered a creature the size of a continent. The remnants drifted as glowing ash into the darkness, their death cries silenced by the echo of his thunder. Time lost meaning in that galaxy of war. Empires rose and crumbled in the span of his endless battles. The warp bent and screamed with every blow he struck, for Thor was a storm not born of chaos, but of creation itself. Even the demons of Khorne, drunk on slaughter, hesitated when the lightning touched them, their immortal flesh unmade by the purity of divine power. On one forsaken world, rivers of blood ran for 1,000 years before his storm washed them clean. Upon its blackened plains, statues of Thor were carved by trembling survivors, not as worship, but as memory, the memory of hope reborn in thunder. Among the Imperium, whispers grew. Some said he was a fragment of the Emperor's will, a lost Primarch made divine. Others called him a false god. Yet to the desperate, he was the storm that never failed. When orcs thundered across the stars, drawn by his challenge, Thor met them gladly. Wag! Banners burned in lightning storms, and the laughter of the greenskins echoed with manic joy as they charged into annihilation. One by one, their warlords fell beneath Mjolnir's wrath, until the void was littered with their shattered fleets. But Thor did not stop. He never stopped, for in his heart he heard the hum of Yggdrasil's roots even here, faint beneath the screams of dying stars. On a world claimed by chaos undivided, he faced a host led by a demon prince crowned in fire. The warp shimmered around them, time distorting as reality buckled beneath the weight of divine fury. Thor's hammer rose, wreathed in stormlight, and the demon prince laughed, its voice shaking mountains. Yet the laughter died as lightning split its armor, burning through its essence until only ash remained. The warp recoiled, and for the briefest instant, the galaxy knew silence. In that silence, Thor stood alone among the ruins, lightning fading from his eyes, and whispered a prayer to Odin. Though he knew the All-Father's voice could not reach this place. Millennia passed, yet Thor did not fade. His armor bore the scars of uncounted wars, his cloak torn by the winds of dying worlds, but Mjolnir remained pure. Across the endless expanse of space, his presence became myth. Entire regiments fought under banners bearing his sigil, the hammer over storm clouds, and entire planets prayed to the thunder for strength. Even the Inquisition, bound by its paranoia and zeal, hesitated to name him heretic. For when Thor's storm came, humanity survived. When it passed, their enemies were gone. In the black depth beyond the Eye of Terror, the gods of chaos stirred. Korn roared his hatred, Nurgle's laughter curdled the stars, Tzeentch whispered vengeance, and Slaanesh wept in delight. Yet even they, beings born of corruption, looked upon the storm and feared. For Thor's lightning was not of the warp. It was older, purer, a force the chaos gods could not command. When his hammer struck their minions, their essence scattered into light, undone by a power that predated even their birth. And still he journeyed, moving through battlefields as ancient as humanity itself, through tomb worlds where Necrons awoke to challenge him, their metallic legions rising in silence. When their gauss fire tore through the air, Thor's storm met it, bending reality around his strikes. His lightning melted their living metal, carving through the undying with the wrath of creation. When their overlord appeared, adorned in the bones of suns, Thor met him head-on. The two titans clashed, thunder against void, light against eternity, until the planet's crust split apart and the sky itself screamed. When silence returned, the Necron fleet was gone, their world shattered, drifting in ruin across the void. Through it all, Thor never lost his heart. Even in this brutal galaxy, he found moments of strange beauty. The song of the void, the flicker of dying stars, the courage of mortal men standing against the impossible. In them, he saw fragments of Asgard, echoes of home. Sometimes, between battles, he would gaze into the stars and wonder if somewhere, across realms beyond reach, the Bifrost still shimmered. Then the call of war would rise again, and he would answer without hesitation. For in this universe, mercy was a luxury, and thunder was the only truth left. And so, he marched onward, through time, through death, through endless night. His storm followed him, reshaping entire sectors, rewriting history, and forging legends that outlasted empires. The Imperium changed, the warp shifted, but the thunder remained. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, the echo of a god's wrath still rolled across the stars. The sound of a hammer striking forever, a reminder that even here, where hope was a fading ember, there existed one who could not fall. The thunder never faded. Across 1,000 burning skies, Thor's storm carried his legend from one war-torn world to another, from frozen moons to molten hives, from the void-black depths of forgotten sectors to the shrieking edges of the warp itself. His coming was the omen of cleansing fire and renewal. Where lightning fell, corruption burned. Yet in this galaxy of endless battle, every victory drew the gaze of darker powers, and Thor soon became not only a savior to mortals, but a threat to the gods of ruin. On a planet lost to time, whose name had been devoured by chaos, Thor faced the armies of Khorne himself. Rivers of blood carved canyons across the land, and the skies burned red with the fire of slaughter. Millions of skulls paved the fields before him, and from beyond the veil, the blood god's laughter echoed, shaking the heavens. Thor walked among the mountains of corpses, his armor drenched in crimson rain, and raised Mjolnir high. The storm above exploded in fury, lightning lashing down like divine judgment. Demons charged, roaring for his head, their axes forged from the souls of the damned, but the hammer of Asgard shattered them one by one, their essence torn apart and scattered into ash. The battlefield burned for 7 days and 7 nights, and when silence fell, Thor stood alone beneath a blackened sky, surrounded by the smoking remains of an army that had once threatened worlds. The blood river had dried into glass, and upon its surface his reflection shimmered. Weary yet resolute, he whispered into the void, a prayer to Odin, to Heimdall, to any who might hear him across the gulf of time and space. But only the storm answered, its voice echoing his own loneliness. He turned his gaze toward the stars and journeyed once more, through shattered warp gates and dying suns, through the corpses of derelict ships drifting in silent voids. He moved like a god of storms reborn. The Imperium followed in his wake, entire crusades forming around his legend. They called him the Thunder Saint, the Hammer of Eternity, the Son of the Lost Sky. Ecclesiarchs crafted hymns in his name, while inquisitors debated whether such divinity could exist outside the Emperor's light. Yet even as they spoke, Thor's storm saved countless lives, his presence bringing order to the chaos that defined their existence. In the darkness of the Eastern Fringe, he found a world under siege by the servants of Nurgle. Decay hung in the air like a living fog, and entire continents were drowned in filth. The ground crawled with life that should not exist, bloated, rotting, pulsing with disease. Thor descended from the clouds in a burst of light, lightning purifying everything it touched. His hammer fell, and oceans of corruption evaporated in seconds. The demons of decay howled, their laughter turning to shrieks of agony as the gods' fury unmade them. When the storm ended, the world was silent, its people kneeling amid cleansing rain. For the first time in centuries, the air smelled of purity. But even as he brought hope, Thor saw the truth. This galaxy would never know peace. The Imperium fought itself as much as it fought its enemies. Corruption thrived not just among demons, but among men. He watched inquisitors burn entire cities to root out heresy, saw noble houses drown in greed while their people starved. He witnessed prayers offered to the Emperor that went unanswered. A storm raged within him, not of fury, but of sorrow. In his heart, he questioned whether even his thunder could change a universe built on endless suffering. Still, he fought on. On the shattered plains of Cadia's remnants, he stood beside the last of the Astra Militarum, as chaos fleets descended. Lightning struck like the wrath of gods, tearing apart vessels in orbit, hammering the ground with divine precision. The soldiers beside him fought to the last man, and when the final bastion fell, Thor raised his hammer and called upon the storm one last time. The sky itself answered. A wave of lightning consumed the horizon, vaporizing everything born of corruption. The planet cracked, then shattered, becoming a beacon of light in the dark void, a monument to sacrifice and defiance. Millennia passed, though time meant little to him. He became something beyond myth. Statues of his likeness stood beside the Emperor's temples. In some worlds, the Adeptus Mechanicus hailed him as a manifestation of the machine god's wrath. In others, he was the Storm Angel, the Emperor's hidden son. To the common folk, he was simply hope, the thunder that came when the darkness grew too deep. Yet Thor himself felt the pull of destiny. Somewhere in the void, he sensed an ancient call, a resonance deep within the fabric of creation itself. He followed it across the stars, through warp storms and black holes, until he reached a place where light itself seemed to bleed. There, he found what none had seen in 10,000 years, a fragment of Yggdrasil's root, still alive, buried in the heart of a dying sun. As he touched it, memory flooded his soul. Asgard, Midgard, his father's voice, the laughter of his brothers, the faces of gods long gone. For the first time in ages, the storm within him calmed. But peace, as always, was fleeting. The warp stirred. A new host of demons emerged, led by an entity older than the gods of chaos, something born from the void between realities. It called itself the End That Hungers, a being of pure entropy that devoured light and will. The sun dimmed, its light collapsing inward, and Thor stood before the abyss as the stars died around him. His hammer pulsed with power, runes glowing brighter than ever before. "Not yet," he whispered, and the storm erupted. The battle raged for eons within a heartbeat. The void itself screamed as creation and destruction clashed. Mjolnir shattered the bones of darkness, lightning carving through the essence of void, but the being endured, feeding on the chaos of the galaxy. Thor called upon everything he was, god, warrior, protector, and unleashed the full fury of his divinity. The dying sun reignited, fueled by his rage, becoming a new star blazing against the darkness. When the light cleared, the entity was gone, erased from existence, and Thor floated amidst the renewed fire, his armor cracked, his breath steady. He knew then that his purpose was not merely to fight, but to remind creation of its worth, to stand between despair and hope, to be the storm that proved even in eternal war, something pure could still endure. And so, he continued, through time unending, through galaxies yet unborn, through the grim darkness where even gods faltered. Wherever lightning shone across the void, wherever the thunder echoed, mortals whispered his name. For in the 41st millennium, where there is only war, the hammer still fell, and the storm never died. Across millennia uncounted, the thunder wandered. The galaxy turned, civilizations rose and fell, but Thor's storm never ceased. Empires that had once known him as savior became dust, their worlds devoured by time. Yet in the hearts of mortals, his name endured like a spark that refused to die. In the void, where stars drifted as ashes of forgotten wars, his lightning still flashed, a heartbeat of divinity echoing through the silence. He had become more than God, more than myth. He was an element, a force woven into the very fabric of existence. When void ships broke through the warp and lightning surged across their hulls, the crew whispered his name. When soldiers stood against impossible odds and thunder rumbled in a clear sky, they swore it was the god of thunder watching over them. His storm had become prayer, his name a weapon against despair. Yet Thor himself wandered far from the eyes of men. Through nebulae that pulsed like dying hearts, through shattered dimensions where gravity screamed, he searched for something he could no longer name. In the silence between stars, he saw memories of Asgard. Golden halls, now nothing but echoes. He remembered Odin's voice, stern yet proud, and felt the ache of distance across eternity. The warp whispered to him, not with corruption, but curiosity, sensing a god it could not consume. It called him the anomaly, the one who defied its hunger. He came upon a derelict craft, drifting at the edge of a black hole. Inside, he found the remains of a custodes, one of the Emperor's own guardians, still standing, encased in gold, his blade driven into the ground as if defying death itself. Around him, thousands of fallen warriors lay in perfect silence, their armor bearing marks of both Chaos and Imperium. Thor placed his hand upon the custode's chest, and a faint pulse of light answered. For a moment, he saw into the man's memories. The siege of Terra, the fall of brothers, the Emperor upon his golden throne. The sorrow struck him like lightning. He whispered words of honor and raised his hammer, unleashing a single bolt that carried their souls into the stars. The void shone for a moment like the birth of a new sun. Then darkness returned, heavier than before. Thor stood there long, the storm around him quiet, the silence vast and infinite. In time, the warp began to shift. Thor felt something stirring beyond the chaos gods, an ancient consciousness, vast and forgotten, older than humanity, older even than the old ones who shaped the first races. It was the primal will of the universe itself, awakened by endless conflict. It spoke not in words, but in thunder, resonating with his very being. For the first time, Thor realized that his storm and the galaxy's fury were not separate. They were one and the same, creation's defiance against oblivion. He traveled to the galactic core, where black holes devoured suns like embers. There, a great rift yawned, the heart of the warp itself, bleeding into real space. Legions of demons surged forth, the sky itself turning inside out. Even the stars recoiled as the boundaries of reality fractured. Thor descended into the maelstrom, Mjolnir blazing brighter than any star. The impact of his arrival shattered entire fleets of chaos vessels, the shock wave erasing billions of demons before they could scream. At the center of the storm, he found a throne of bones and fire, upon which sat a colossal figure, the Void Tyrant, the first demon ever birthed by creation's fear. It had no face, only endless mouths, speaking in the voices of the dead. The air around it pulsed with hatred, and the warp twisted, feeding on its hunger. Thor stood before it, silent, lightning crawling across his skin. The tyrant rose, each movement warping space, each breath erasing worlds. The storm met the void. Mjolnir clashed with the demon's will, and the impact tore galaxies apart. Warp and reality collided, light screaming as the laws of existence fractured. The tyrant's claws raked across Thor's chest, drawing ichor like molten gold, but he did not fall. His hammer rose again, burning with the power of every storm that had ever been. Lightning struck from every direction, each bolt carrying the fury of countless prayers. The warp shrieked, unable to contain him. Then, for a moment beyond time, Thor's essence expanded. He saw all of existence. Every war, every death, every prayer whispered into darkness. He saw the Emperor upon his throne, unseeing yet eternal. He saw chaos feeding upon fear, hope birthing new light, and humanity clinging to its fragile will to survive. And he understood. His purpose was not to destroy or rule, but to balance, to be the thunder that followed the storm of despair, to remind all creation that even in ruin, light endures. With that understanding, he unleashed a storm unlike any before. Mjolnir struck the tyrant's heart, and the explosion transcended reality. The warp howled as it was burned clean by divine thunder. Across the galaxy, Psyker screamed as a wave of light swept through them. Not pain, but renewal. For a brief instant, the warp stilled. No whispers, no screams, no hunger, just silence and light. When it was over, Thor floated within the eye of a newborn sun. His armor was shattered, his hammer cracked, but his eyes burned brighter than ever. The warp receded, its tide broken, though not destroyed. He knew the cycle would return. War, corruption, rebirth. Yet something within the universe had changed. The storm had left its mark. He drifted back toward the stars of the Imperium. Fleets emerged to meet him, their banners shining with his sigil now painted beside the Aquila. To them, he was no longer just a god or warrior. He was a symbol, the storm that reminded them they could still rise. Chaplains spoke of his sacrifice. Tech priests studied the energy that lingered in his wake, and among the people, songs spread like wildfire. They called it the Hymn of the Hammer, and it was sung even in the void where light had never reached. Thor watched from afar, unseen, content. He had no throne, no crown, no kingdom. His reward was the thunder that rolled across the cosmos, carrying his promise that no darkness, however eternal, could silence the storm. And so he walked again into the endless night, lightning tracing his path across a galaxy that would never forget his name. For in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, even the storm endures. The storm was eternal. It had no beginning and no end, only rhythm, the heartbeat of creation itself. Thor's thunder rolled through the galaxy long after the memory of his form had faded. Worlds that had once known him by sight now knew him only by legend. Priests invoked his name beside the emperors in their prayers. Space Marines carried lightning sigils upon their armor, a symbol of his divine fury. In the cold depths of space, the storm whispered through the void, and every bolt of lightning became a promise. That light would never truly die. On Terra, beneath the shadow of the golden throne, the Astronomicon flickered for a single instant. A pulse of energy rippled through the psychic beacon that guided humanity's fleets across the stars. In that blinding moment, the Emperor, entombed, silent, thought by most to be unhearing, stirred. Within the vast labyrinth of his mind, the storm's echo reached him. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor's gaze turned toward the warp, not with wrath, but recognition. The faintest whisper escaped his lips, a name half remembered, half forgotten. Thunderer. And then the light returned, steadier than before. Far beyond, Thor walked through the void once more. His body was no longer bound to mortal matter. He was lightning given form, thought made flesh. The scars of his last battle glowed faintly across his armor, each one a constellation of memory. He drifted through the wreckage of worlds, through the whispers of dying stars, through the ruins of long-forgotten empires. Wherever he passed, silence followed, the silence before the rain. He came upon a planet swallowed by shadow, its surface crawling with the corrupted machines of the dark mechanicum. Massive forges belched black fire into the sky, twisting the air into poison. Thor descended like judgment itself. The ground split beneath his arrival, and Mjolnir's light tore through the factories, vaporizing steel and demon alike. The corrupted tech priests shrieked, their binary prayers warping into screams as their false gods abandoned them. When the storm cleared, nothing remained but glass and light. The surviving humans, frail and starving, knelt in awe, whispering their gratitude to the storm. Thor said nothing. His presence alone was benediction. He journeyed onward, through dying systems and empty sectors, following a call that came not from the warp, but from within himself. The sound was faint at first, the echo of roots, the pulse of something ancient. When he reached the edge of reality, he found a single tree, growing upon a fragment of broken world, drifting in the void. Its bark shimmered like silver, its branches touched by starlight. It was a remnant of Yggdrasil, older even than the galaxy itself. Beneath its boughs, the warp fell silent. Thor knelt before it, feeling the pulse of eternity within its core. He placed Mjolnir at its roots. The hammer glowed, the runes along its side burning brighter until the metal dissolved into pure energy, merging with the tree. The roots stretched outward, invisible but vast, touching every corner of the galaxy, threading through stars and planets alike. Where the roots passed, storms began to bloom, not of destruction, but of renewal. Warp rifts closed, demons shriveled, and for fleeting moments, the galaxy knew peace. From the darkness beyond, the Chaos gods watched. Khorne raged that his wars grew silent. Nurgle wept that his decay had been undone. Tzeentch pondered the meaning of a storm that could not be predicted, while Slaanesh fell quiet, sensing a purity too blinding to corrupt. Yet none dared to challenge him again, for Thor had become something beyond their reach, not a rival, not a god, but a truth of existence itself. Millennia passed. The Imperium endured its endless cycle of glory and ruin. New crusades rose, new heresies burned, and still the thunder rolled. Entire generations were born and died beneath skies that rumbled with unseen storms. On distant worlds, children were told stories of a man who carried lightning in his hand and defied the darkness alone. They said that when the storm roared loudest, it was because he was near, watching, waiting, protecting. In one such age, a lone Primaris Marine stood upon the ramparts of a besieged world. The sky was black with the wings of Tyranids. The ground quaked beneath endless claws. He raised his bolt rifle in defiance, his armor marked by a single sigil, a hammer carved into lightning. As the swarm descended, thunder split the heavens. Lightning struck the battlefield in blinding arcs, tearing through Xeno's flesh, reducing them to ash. When the light faded, a figure of storm and fire stood among the ruins. The Marine fell to his knees, tears burning his face. Thor did not speak, but the warrior heard his voice in his soul. Not words, but the sound of strength reborn. The battle ended before it began. The world was saved. And when dawn broke, the god was gone, leaving only the faint scent of ozone and the echo of thunder. 1,000 years later, the legend became scripture. The ecclesiarchy declared the storm canon, a sacred text chronicling the appearances of the Thunderer across millennia. Some worshipped him as the Emperor's forgotten son. Others saw him as a shard of divine will, proof that even in darkness, creation remembered its gods. The Mechanicus studied his residual energy and found patterns of lightning that defied logic, describing them as the living code of the machine spirit itself. The Inquisition debated his nature endlessly, angel or heretic, savior or threat, but none could deny the truth. Where the storm struck, the darkness recoiled. And deep within the warp, where reality and nightmare intertwined, the faint roots of Yggdrasil pulsed with hidden life. From them spread balance, fragile but enduring. Thor's essence flowed through them like wind through leaves, his consciousness now part of the great cycle. He no longer needed a body, a weapon, or even a name. He had become what he was always meant to be. The storm that cleanses, the thunder that reminds, the unending defiance of light against shadow. Across the eons, the Emperor's light flickered once more. A storm rolled across Terra's skies, though no clouds could be seen. Every sensor on the planet recorded a pulse of impossible energy, the resonance of something divine brushing against the mortal plane. The custodes bowed their heads, the psychers wept, and even the void itself trembled. Somewhere, beyond the veil, two divine forces, one golden, one thunder, met in silent understanding. Neither ruled, neither bowed, but together they stood as sentinels of what remained. Then the storm faded into silence. But the silence was not empty. It was peace, the kind that comes after the last strike of thunder, when the world holds its breath, knowing the storm has passed, but the rain has given life anew. The Imperium continued its eternal wars, its endless struggle against the night. But in every bolt of lightning, in every whisper of rain, in every flicker of light across the void, the universe remembered. And somewhere beyond stars, in the timeless space between moments, Thor watched, not as a god above, but as a part of everything. The pulse of creation, the echo of courage, the promise that no darkness would ever be final. For even in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, the thunder still speaks, and the storm endures.